Yeah, this is the section at the west wall. Here's our tube that's tipped to be in plane with the glass. It's rising and falling over this bigger tube, and the curtain wall is running along the outside. The gutter stays the same, and this is a pretty good span, 15 feet. Big lights of glass here. Um, Guess we'll get to the details. Here's the gutter. It's complicated. We agreed to do this very low profile gutter, and then we had to also build drainage into it. So it's all high gutter bars, and we're trying to drain into this inner piece for backup drainage. And that gets rather complicated. Here's the strap that I mentioned before. And I think we made those 9 inches wide with 3 screws up here. Those are all pre-drilled and tapped. It should just be bolt them up where you want them to go. And then you've got the outer liner, which I'm hoping will snap in. It should flex enough to go past and then just get caught, and we're going to hold it down with structural sealant. And hopefully it all fits tight enough that it'll work. I'd be curious to know how well that works or doesn't work. As you install it, you're going to start with the frame, and you're going to end up with frames that look like this. Then you have this inner piece of flashing, which we made in 2 halves, and we omitted these end pieces because we realized we needed those if we made it 1 piece, but once we went 2, we could get rid of that. So you're going to have to take the piece and it's notched to fit around the support and kind of nudge it up to the support, and set it in, and then take the one that falls inside and put it on the other end of the bay and set it over that. We have some flashing tape, and it might not be a bad idea to lay a little flashing tape from the rafter to the pan, just so no batting can wiggle out, or you just wouldn't want little fibers of it coming out later on. A little piece of styrofoam on the sides that'll kind of help capture it, keep it from wiggling. And then it's going to get stuffed with batting, which is going to be a problem because you got to put that in while you put this tray in, and then seal the tray so the batting doesn't get soaked, I guess. And then that flashing tray snaps onto this little arm and put some screws in it to hold it. Now we notched it so you can snap it around the rafter. So the rafter is notched, very complex. Here's your rafter bar. It comes up, goes over, and comes up, and then goes out like this. And then you can see there's a little cut there. Now I've got a CAD model of it. It's a little bit easier to see, except there's too many parts. So here's this clamping bar. That's that part. Here's the rafter, clamping bar. There's a gap right here. And then we're caulking the flashing behind this, along here. And it's going to caulk right underneath the lip of the rafter. And you also have to fill in this gap right here. That's really important. If you don't, where the notch is in the flashing to get by the nose of the rafter, anything that would trail back in and follow the bar back over would leak into the building, and we'd have no access to ever do anything with it. It'd be a real mess. So you want to be real careful to get this clamping bar, this inner liner, and the rafters sealed up as tight as you can so that it's basically waterproof. So in here in the model, here's our inner piece with the styrofoam. This would be the batting. It's the best you can do in a CAD. And there's the clamping bar. I changed the shape of it to not be a tube like that, but it's the same general idea. And these bars are drilled and tapped to take these screws, so that shouldn't be too bad. And then the straps go over the top. The big thing you want to make sure is that little nub captures this. That makes it pretty strong. I don't think it'll come off. Spent a little time looking at it. I may send you another video later. I have it on a camera, but I forgot to transfer it for today. So that's that. Let's go back to the drawings. That's the key part, is this seal. I mean, a little pocket to grab the backer rod when you stuff it in there. By all means, if you want to put a little seal here where it wraps the rafter just to back up the backup, that can't hurt. One screw on this side, 3 that side. We didn't have enough space to be even. And I think that gets you pretty close with the gutter. This is an elevation at that detail we just looked at in the model. So here's the clamping bar and with the screws, and here's the caulk, and you got to go up here. Anything you can do to seal it in this area is only going to help us as well. This detail you have as a separate standalone sheet. I've now added it to the set, but it is not in your erection package drawings. This is a little easier to read. It's just the parts that span. And that makes it look a little bit more understandable as to not so many intersecting bars shown. This is our rafter, the way our frame is going to notch. We have these T's at the end, and then there's a channel that goes over, and that's going to hold the grating. So you can probably put these channels on after you set the glass, would be my thought. But do put a spacer block as close to the T as you can. Let's go back and look at that detail. So here's the T. So if you can get a spacer block right here when you try to bring these big lights in, just to keep it from catching the metal. And then don't put the channels on until later. Once you capture the rafter in the bracket, you should be good for the spacing between it, but the channels have a slot to give you a little tolerance, and then these angles also have a slot for tolerance. And then later on your grating will fit and be locked in so it can't wiggle side to side. But I think all the grating, the channels, and the angles happen later. And you can just kind of work around the T to start. That's all we could do. We had to do the grate. This is how our crossbars overlap. Let's look at that for a minute. That's important because we had to do some stuff. We were shorted material by the extruder, so we couldn't cut the bar that long. We had to cut it 1/8 of an inch short, so we lost that little nub on the end. So if you can wipe all the way around this edge with sealant after you put it in, that would be a big help. I don't know if you use a stick. Hopefully it's not too bad to do. You could also put sealant on the bars as you put it in and then try to just smooth it over what squeezes out. But we lost this drip edge because that 1/8 of an inch allowed us to get 2 bars per piece of stock, and we had to do it for delivery. I don't think it hurts any performance, especially if these are sealed joints. That's better all the way around anyway. So do look, there's a handful of bars that do have the nub, but most of them are cut with just this backup one. And the backup one will be enough to strip off anything that would get through the sealant joint, over the metal overlap, past this trap. You know, it's plenty good. It'll work well. It's a very good skylight. These are our typical notches. Here's the ridge detail. We did the same thing with the inner flashings. These covers aren't there. We notched it tight to the support. And then you can put these parts in and maybe put a little tape on it just to keep the bats from squeezing out. The panels should be gapped at every rafter. And I think you probably end up with one screw about here, and then you got a seal between them there to do your retainer joint. You got an inner flashing. the insulation, and then this outer piece. So there's a lot of monkeying around when we get to the penetrations for the tie-offs. Let's do that right away. I'll come back here. So right now we show these tie-offs as if they are part of the panel, and that's because originally these tie-off stanchions were going to be done as you set the frame, but they went ahead because we're late delivering and welded them down on the center of the steel. So then we have to change to build a little tolerance in. So our collars are now going to be an add-on piece for both. Here it already was an add-on, but now the one on top will be as well. And that will let you adjust a ½ inch or so for tolerance. I think we're going to put a smaller hole in the panel and let you cut where you need it, just in case you have to cut it 3/4 to one side or 3/4 the other way. It seemed better to do that. I can change that if that's too hard. Give me a call immediately. These ridge panels are not made as of July 17th. They probably won't even be started being made until July 26th would be my guess when they'll start being made. So we can make some adjustments to suit what you guys want to do. Where the panel, the inner goes, the inner flashing, there's like a box section with a square cutout that should fit around, that should let this move wherever it needs to go, or fit around all that. And then we have to pack it tight with batting because it is a thermal transfer. Sorry, let me zoom out a bit. So this will get cold, and we have to use this flashing and this insulation to keep any moist inside air from touching it, turning to condensate. So it's important to kind of keep a nice seal here. If you can caulk that, great. Flashing tape would work. Anything just to isolate it from the inside air, and then pack it in with batting. That way, even if it gets cold and it doesn't hit moist air, nothing can condensate on it. So here's another section looking the other way where it's got the end plates, and you can see how it goes right down to the beam. Now we can't insulate this. We're hoping that by the time it gets here it's warm enough to be okay. That's as good as we could do. These brackets are because we didn't have enough tolerance for the truss. Hopefully you won't need them. You have 20, 25 of them. And what they do is they use the same holes in the bar and just allows the misalignment to happen and gives a little bit more adjustment to it. So they're there if you need it, but this is not a special detail. This is a tolerance detail with a different way to make tolerance up if we have to. So keep the gutters centered, take tolerance at the ridge. We've got clips to kind of help, and that's where we're at with that. And then we come into other perimeter details.